Welcome to Sisflix, the podcast where we won't judge you for talking through the movie. Sisflix are the movies you laugh at, yearn for, and overanalyze with your girls, significant others, and now us.
We are your hosts,
Paola
and Nadhya, two sisters and designers who discuss chick flicks we hate to love,
tropes we love to hate,
and all of the aesthetic choices in between. Join us as we break down our favorite movies together.
Hey, sister.
Hey, sister. I have a pop quiz for you.
I hate pop quizzes, but okay, let's go.
Were you an English monarchy girly, a roaring 20s girly, or an ancient Egypt girly?
Ooh.
Because I think at 15, we all latched on to one. I was like more of a 1920s girly myself.
I remember that. It was Paris 1920s too.
Yeah, no, it was a real time of my life.
I respect it.
There are eras that girls become obsessed with, and there are locations girls become obsessed with.
Yeah.
And it's either New York, London, or Paris if you're like American, you know? I'm sure in other parts of the world, like those cities are different, but as an American girl from the East Coast, from New York, I was like, all right, been there, done that.
It has
London
to be
and Paris. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As a bookish period film girly, it was a Tudor dynasty for me.
Discuss.
It started with Elizabeth the Golden Age. I was obsessed with that movie.
I remember that.
That brought me to watch like every single movie about Elizabeth I. That led me to the Boleyns. That led me to the disaster that was Henry VIII and his wives and their fates. And that brings you to like Mary, Queen of Scots. And that takes you to like a whole other layer of interest into the English-Scottish relationship, which I feel then eventually when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you fall right in Outlander, Highlander land.
Jesus Christ.
So once you start at Tudor, it's all interconnected. I have recently discovered a blind spot in this era for me. And that blind spot consists of the story of Mary Tudor and Lady Jane Grey. And my little curiosity for this little pocket of time was sparked by none other than the show My Lady Jane, recently released by Amazon Prime. And for younger viewers, I can see My Lady Jane being like the ultimate English monarchy gateway to dip your toe into some English history. And furthermore, women's history. Especially like the lesser known female historical figures whose stories are often overlooked by history. And one of them being Lady Jane Grey.
So we're going to talk about My Lady Jane, the TV show based on a book. We're doing a little TV show recap, as you guys have come to know and love from Sisflix Pod. Our first one was Bridgerton. Our second one was Heartstopper. And our third one is My Lady Jane, which has only had one season consisting of 8 episodes. So we will be discussing those in order. My Lady Jane is a show that has received a ton of praise and acclaim for its ahistorical representation of the life of Lady Jane Grey, as Paola mentioned, who is also known in history as the 9 Days Queen. And if you are a lover of history, English monarchs, fiction, fantasy, romance, this is the show for you. So let's fucking get into it. My Lady Jane was released last June of 2024, and it is based on a book of the same name by Brodie Ashton, Cynthia Hand, and Jodie Meadows. This book was published in 2016. This kind of hit like right after Bridgerton season 3. Or Springerton, as we know it around these parts.
And for many like myself, it really was the perfect way to defer the Bridgerton withdrawal because we couldn't just live off of pollen edits, you know, until 2026. So My Lady Jane really hit the spot.
And My Lady Jane, as a show and also as a book, kind of sits in this category that subverts historical context, right? So whether it's the language, which My Lady Jane does, the casting, which it does, the events, which it absolutely does, we will get into. Other shows like this that we've discussed, Mary and George. We fucking loved Mary and George. Fucking hit. There's also The Great, which is a show about Catherine the Great, Russian monarch, starring Elle Fanning. That one is on Hulu.
One of my favorite things about movies and series like these is that, yes, we get, a fictionalized take on history, but it opens up a curiosity of what actually happened. Wait, hold on. Did this person really fall in love with this person? Right. I'm watching it from the romance gaze, right? I'm here for the yearning, burning, and pining, right? And it inspires you to look into this period of time, to look into these characters and find out what really happened.
Watching shows like this, whether they're historically accurate or not, makes you interested in the actual history. You're going to go and research, like, oh, what's good? Lady Jane Grey? Like, what did she look like? Did she like her husband? How old was she? Like, and you're going to look that shit up and learn a lot more about history than you would have previously, even though what you're consuming is fictional content.
Absolutely. Yep. So let me give you a little brief history on the story that My Lady Jane is based on. My Lady Jane is based on a real-life historical figure who we've mentioned, Lady Jane Grey, niece of King Henry VIII. She is known as the 9 Days Queen. Due to her Protestant beliefs, she was chosen to rule after the death of her cousin, King Edward VI. Third legitimate child of King Henry VIII, right? But he was first in line because he's a guy.
Yeah.
His two elder sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, were overlooked in that succession.
Edward, in his final act of succession as king, because even though he was quite young, he was like kind of chronically ill and dying. He died as a teenager. He appointed Lady Jane Grey and her male heirs, that was specified, to be the monarchs. Lady Jane Grey was his cousin, his first cousin, the niece of King Henry VIII. However, this line of succession overlooked King Edward's elder sisters, Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth. Mary would have been first in line behind Edward. However, she was a devout Catholic. Edward was a devout Protestant, as was Lady Jane Grey. In order to preserve Protestantism in England, Edward decided to twist the line of succession towards Lady Jane Grey. And obviously, major beef right here. Like, the girls are throwing fists. The family is fighting.
Yeah.
After Edward's death, Jane became queen. However, she was only queen for 9 days because she was deposed by Princess Mary, who then became Queen Mary, who then became known famously or infamously as Bloody Mary. Mary Tudor, who ended up only reigning as queen for about 5 years, did not leave any legitimate issue, was succeeded by her sister, Princess Elizabeth, who was one of the longest reigning monarchs in English history, did not marry and never had any children. Something that I love deeply is that King Henry did so much work and did so many horrific things to secure his line and to guarantee a male heir, only to have that Tudor line die out with his own children. And I think that's beautiful. When Princess Mary deposed Jane, she sentenced her to death by beheading. She was executed on February 12th, 1554, at the age of 17. The irony of trying to eradicate Catholicism from England only to have one of your own children be the one to bring it back, even though it's for a brief time. Man, the British...
Yo.
Your monarchs are fucking crazy, dog.
Now with that tidbit, the story in the series literally says, fuck that. What if things happened differently? What if Lady Jane Grey was not beheaded? How would that have happened? This story gives us an alternate universe where King Edward escapes instead of dying. Lady Jane ascends the throne successfully, or semi-successfully.
There's still beef.
There's still beef. And here's the kicker. Instead of Protestants versus Catholics, you have magical shapeshifters called Ethians versus ordinary humans with no powers called Verities.
No.
So this series takes that historical element, fictionalizes it, what if, and then on top of that, gives the fantasy girlies something to munch on. hey, here's a little fantasy. Here we have shapeshifters and magic. Who doesn't love some fantastical elements in their historical romance? So in this story, the Verities, quote unquote, normal humans, hate the Ethians, right? Mm-hmm. So what do? They oppress them. And the Ethians fight back against their oppression. And so the Verities deem them dangerous criminals. So with the addition of this fantastical element to the story, it also creates an allegory for racism and classism as we know it to exist in our countries in this century.
So this show is definitely very satirical. It's very irreverent. The dialogue, the delivery, a lot of the styling as far as like hair and makeup is like definitely very anachronistic.
Yeah, it's very similar to The Princess Bride, The Knight's Tale, Ella Enchanted. I mean, those movies have this air of nostalgia because we all grew up watching them or we experienced them at a young age. Mm. In more modern context, the production felt a lot like Prime Video's Cinderella.
Ah, yes.
Right? Like very quirky, campy, a bit over the top sometimes. Yeah. And then Hulu's The Great.
Yes.
And it makes for a funny, lighthearted show. This is definitely for somebody who likes historical satire, sarcasm, witty banter. It makes for a fun watch with a historical context.
Mm-hmm. The show, which as we mentioned, 1 season, 8 episodes, dropped in 1 day on Amazon Prime, and it was really well received generally by critics. It has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. Some of my favorite movies don't break 7 on IMDb. However, in spite of this positive critical reception, it was canceled within a few weeks of its release. Why? We don't know. Do people hate women? Do people hate having fun, a good time, history? Why was this show less successful? So, according to Amazon, when they announced the cancellation, they brought up low viewership as the reason for it being canceled. Within the first 2 months of its release, it didn't really break any viewership records as they were hoping. It didn't find whatever threshold of viewership they deem worthy to continue a show. However, its early weeks of release coincided with the Olympics, the 2024 Olympics, this huge global cultural moment, which definitely impacts viewership of something like a streaming service's 8-episode show.
I mean, and if gymnastics and pole vaulting have anything to do with it, the girlies were distracted, okay?
And honestly, I mean, memeing the Olympics was like a professional sport in itself for like a month. So there wasn't really a lot of cultural capital to spend on a very niche historical fiction show on a streaming platform like Amazon, especially a show that was not marketed well to begin with.
It really wasn't. I didn't even come across the show until after it had already been out for a week or two. Mm-hmm. And again, it was me searching for something to see in the wave of...
to cut that Bridgerton hangover.
Yeah, so I didn't even see trailers for it until it was already out on Amazon. Mm-hmm. Why is that? They didn't invest in the marketing.
I agree. I didn't see anything about My Lady Jane outside of fan-created edits and content.
Exactly.
For like weeks. I remember seeing like, a fan edit of Guilford and Jane and being like, oh, this must be like an old show. And then it's like, oh, this came out 3 months ago? What? I've never heard of
Nadhya,
this.
Did you watch the show yet? No. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And even so, when I'm like, oh, Nadhya, I started watching the show, like, you should give it a try. It's kind of like, okay. You kind of have in the back of mind, you hear that it's canceled. And then you're like, oh,
should I even watch
it? So do I really want to get into this show now? And so that hurts even the viewership, or not even that it hurts the viewership, because I think it found its audience. It's not expanding on its audience. Mm-hmm. If you're not marketing this well, there's audiences out there that it's going to miss because you're counting on an algorithm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you mess up if you're counting on, like Amazon does, numbers. Because now you're prioritizing numbers over the full enjoyment of its audience. Amazon just deemed that audience not significant enough for its bottom line.
And it's always been obviously tricky and risky to become a successful TV show. I don't think there's ever been a time where making a TV show was a famously cool, chill, and easy. But before the streaming service model, network TV was a little bit more willing to invest in a show if it had kind of a fervent following, right? The way that the streaming model has kind of upended that is like they'll invest the money into one season. And because things just drop in one day, very little anticipation is built unless you put a very strong and expensive marketing campaign behind something. All you're relying on is stats. While there have been shows that are big fan favorites and end up getting canceled, it's interesting how like network TV, you have a lot more cases of shows being killed by their networks and there being like a fan outcry of how much they love the fucking show, and another network will pick it up.
Yeah.
Or it'll get picked up 2 or 3 years later for another season or something like that. Like, what did that happen with Arrested Development? I think as soon as a streamer is like, you're not meeting my investment and I'm not going to invest in a second season because we are not an advertiser driven model, you're cooked. And it's funny because Amazon does fucking run ads depending on what your tier of membership is. So I think that's very, very hypocritical. Whatever, right? I'm not a fucking business person.
And as a period romance lover, we saw this happen with Sanditon. It was dropped by PBS Masterpiece, and
in
then
the US.
It received such an outcry that PBS brought it back. However, a couple years later, missing out on the same casting, missing out on the same writers, missing out on the same departments, and then you have a different show. So right now, there is an active campaign going on online to bring back My Lady Jane for a second season. So this campaign is the Save My Lady Jane campaign. It's a hashtag. It's on socials. There's a petition online. Mm-hmm. You can find it at savemyladyjane.com. They even have a GoFundMe where they use the funds to promote and advocate for the show to networks like Prime, to other networks to try to pick it up.
The team behind this campaign is led by Deb and Juliet, and we had the pleasure of chatting with both of them about the show My Lady Jane and the hashtag Save My Lady Jane campaign. A little champagne for my campaign. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Let's go. Cheers.
We will do a little mini-sode that will drop on the main feed where we will share our convo, a lovely convo. They were both so wonderful to speak to, as well as little snippets of our conversation at the end of the season 1 recap. So if you guys make it all the way to episode 4 of our My Lady Jane recap, you will hear some delicious nuggets from our conversation with Deb and Jules. From the hashtag. Our episode 4, yeah. From behind the hashtag Save My Lady Jane campaign.
Yes, so stay tuned. That'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks.
According to an article from the Harvard Crimson, so the student newspaper at Harvard, the hashtag My Lady Jane by mid-September of 2024 had garnered over 18,000 posts on Instagram and over 7,000 posts on TikTok, both of which obviously have only increased since then, if this was in September of 2024. It's true that My Lady Jane has not had the immediate mass viewership that hit shows like Bridgerton and Outer Banks were fortunate enough to have when they were first released. However, it has accumulated a significant fan base of its own, one which is passionate enough to be making content and discussing it online. So that was written after the announcement of My Lady Jane's cancellation. And I think My Lady Jane was incredibly poorly marketed. Like, I don't know where Amazon put any marketing dollars for it. And you could maybe, I'm not in the television business, maybe make an argument that they weren't that keen on marketing it super hard. Maybe because it's a women-driven show. Maybe because it's based on a book written by women, presumably for women and teenage girls. Run by a woman. The show was directed and written mostly by women. So you could say that. I'm not Amazon. I don't know its heart. Agreed. So I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I think that there were a lot of unfortunate factors that were working against My Lady Jane's success as a show. When in reality, like, at the very least, give it a second season.
Yes, absolutely. And also the fact that it's based on a book. So you have an ending.
Yeah.
You could have at least gotten it to end the book. And yes, the series does diverge from the book, but it follows it close enough that at the end of this season, you're at the halfway mark of the book. you would have gotten the viewership, you would have gotten the support, and then you give the show more time to reach a wider audience.
Mm-hmm. And it's a delicate blend of trying to know your audience, trying to entice them, trying to meet budgets and profit margins and blah, blah, blah. I work in a corporate environment, like obviously in a much different field, but I know how some of that shit tends to go. And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you'll have people that really love something that they're working on, and because it doesn't meet some type of price, some type of budget, it has to go. I'm not saying that's good. I don't agree with corporate bullshit, but most of us, right, have had some professional interaction with corporate bullshit. I think we understand how it works. But aside from our dissatisfaction with Amazon Prime Studios for not renewing My Lady Jane for season 2 and not marketing it well for season 1 in the first place, we want to get into the summary of the show so that we can finally start talking about it.
Yes. Let's get into My Lady Jane. I'm going to hit you with the small back of the book.
Let's go.
So I'm going to give you the series back of the book, and I'm going to give you the actual back of the book. Mm-hmm. So for the series back of the book summary, we have Lady Jane Grey and her husband Guilford lived during the reign of Edward VI, son of Henry VIII. She unexpectedly finds herself crowned queen overnight and becomes the target of criminals who want her throne and her head.
Ooh.
Actual back of the book summary of the book, My Lady Jane. At 16, Lady Jane Grey is about to be married off to a stranger and caught up in a conspiracy to rob her cousin, King Edward, of his throne. But those trifling problems aren't for Jane to worry about. Jane gets to be Queen of England. Like, that could go wrong.
Wild take.
What?
Let's get into the scorecard. So tell me, is this a straight or queer story?
The principal love story is a straight love story, and one of our main characters enters into a gay relationship.
Ooh. Does this have source material?
The series is based on a book of the same name, My Lady Jane, by co-authors Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jodie Meadows. It has a 4-star rating on Storygraph. I read the book and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
We both read the book as an audiobook, and give that narrator Oscars.
Yo, can we get her name?
My Lady Jane audiobook is narrated by Katherine Kellgren.
Give her some awards. Are there awards for narrating?
I fucking hope so, dog, because she ate it up.
I loved her narration. It made it such an easy listen. Mm-hmm. And entertaining as hell.
Oh my God, yeah. Sister is a story by a man or a woman.
The series was created by a woman, Gemma Burgess, written by a woman, principally Gemma Burgess and Alyssa Lerner, produced by women, Jamie Babbitt, Sarah Bradshaw, Gemma Burgess, and Meredith Glynn, and directed by a woman, J.B. Babbitt, who directed 5 out of the 8 episodes, and then Stefan Schwartz did the other 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. So
lots of women at the helm of this show. So, sister, what is the trope?
The trope. Oh my God, we got a couple. It's been a while, but we have a little bit of a trope buffet, okay? Because we have an arranged marriage with enemies to lovers flavor, forced proximity. We have an inheritance scheme, I guess, if you can look at the throne that way. Mm-hmm. Any more that come to mind?
No, because the rest gets a little crazy. All right. This show stars Emily Bader as Lady Jane Grey. You will soon be seeing her star in the movie adaptation of Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation, along with one of Nadja's, my fictional boyfriends, Tom Blythe. Edward Blumell is our main lead as Lord Guilford Dudley. You might have seen him most recently in The Discovery of Witches alongside Matthew Goode. We love him here.
Who looks good.
We love him
in
here.
The Discovery of Witches.
Then we have Jordan Peters playing King Edward. Kate O'Flynn. Kate O'Flynn as Princess Mary, putting her entire ass in that role. Like,
yeah,
she did the damn thing. I'm not saying I agree with a lot of it, but the bitch put in work. For any future comments that I make regarding like her characterization, that actress fucking crushed it.
She did it with her face. With
her whole body.
I couldn't even look at her sometimes. I'm like, to get this.
She was so fucking. She was so good. Abby Hearn as Princess Bess, or as we know her in history, Elizabeth I. Anna Chancellor as Lady Frances Grey, Jane's mom. We know Anna Chancellor as the OG Caroline Bingley in the 1995 Pride and Prejudice miniseries. Bitch, I knew that face was familiar. Damn.
That bitch. And she has not changed a bit.
Not an ounce. That mother is
ounce.
Caroline Bingley.
It always goes back to Pride and Prejudice here.
Rob Brydon plays Lord Dudley. And our last major player, Lord Seymour, is played by Dominic Cooper, who is very familiar. He's been in tons of shit. I was honestly kind of surprised to see him in this show in a supporting role. But we specifically here at Sisflix Pod Corp know him from The Duchess, movie starring Keira Knightley as her lover.
As her lover.
And since we're exploring a world of historical fiction and fantasy, the showrunners decided to go with colorblind casting to achieve a diverse cast. The series music is done by composer Reel Jones and music supervisor Sierra Lewis. Reel Jones, who also worked on Harlots, set out to blend the period's orchestral instrumentation with modern rock production. And Sierra Lewis, it might be Kira, curated a soundtrack made up of classic rock covers by female-fronted artists and bands. This lends to this kind of like rock and roll, irreverent, rebellious mood that we get throughout the entire series. The best part, like my husband and I watched this together, our favorite part was the music. Every single time the music hit perfectly. For the series costume and wardrobe, Stephanie Colley, R.I.P. She actually passed away, unfortunately, this past October, was the costume designer. She also worked on Peaky Blinders and most recently the Henry Cavill-led film Argylle. Production design is by Will Hughes Jones, who, if that name sounds familiar to you, has worked on numerous period films and shows, specifically Bridgerton, The Spanish Princess, and one of our favorite period films here at Sisflix Corp, 2011's Jane Eyre. Will Hughes Jones, a G. I don't know if he's ever been called that, but we're going to do it.
Will Hughes Jones, a G.
A G. Let's fucking get into the plot summary. It's not going to be a fucking summary. And the commentary. That's what you're here for, baby. Let's go.
Episode 1, titled, Who'll Be Next in Line? And the episode description on Prime goes, meet Lady Jane Grey. Brilliant, but more usefully beautiful, and about to have the worst day of her life.
So far.
So far. So far. So we open this series with Jane. And as we open the show, it immediately lets you know, by way of scientifically driven feminine care, that this show is sex positive, feminist, and smart. Jane, as we see her cutting some herbs, is an herbalist. And she is treating her friend's feminine concern with a homemade salve. As she's going to apply this salve on her friend, she tells her to abstain from sexual intercourse if a man's member looks postular. Gross, girl. And as they talk about men and marriage and not being able to abstain from sex,
being eager participants in sex, which, cool.
Jane listens to all this and expresses she is saving herself for herself and doesn't plan to marry. Her dream is to write a book on medicinal herbs, publish it, and become financially independent. Girl.
Go off, queen.
We love a feminist independent queen, even if it's 1553. So this is Jane. She's smart, she's curious, ahead of her time, stubbornly independent, and friends with the service members of her home.
So we instantly like Jane.
She's our hero. She is summoned to meet a guest by the name of the Duke of Leicester. We see her run through the garden, picking up flowers as a cover of David Bowie's Rebel Rebel plays over the scene. So automatically, you've been into the show 3 minutes, you're getting a David Bowie cover by a female band. So we're cool. We're vibing. She's cool. She's free. Running through this garden, she meets her mother and 2 sisters already standing in line to meet this Duke. And let me start right away, literally representing Jane's struggles throughout the series and her story to conform while others get in line, even if it's just for appearances, as we see her line up with her mom and her sisters. So off the bat, we get a clear dynamic between these women. Jane runs up and stands right next to Margaret, the youngest. And Margaret is instantly fucking with her about the appearance of her poor flowers that she just ran through the field with. Catherine, next to her in age, comes to Jane's defense and compliments the flowers. Then they all tell each other to shut up. And then the mom shuts them all up and tells them to smile and earn their keep. So there we have it. The keeper and facilitator of the patriarchy. Good old Lady Frances. And speaking of the patriarchy, we then meet the Grand Duke of Leicester, who we learn is the great uncle who inherited everything after their late father passed away, since women cannot inherit property.
Lit.
Yeah, so we get a little Featherington vibe here. And something I noticed off the bat from these first couple of minutes is that the gray women tend to wear a lot of blue, specifically Jane and her mother, who also comes off as the most independent and powerful within their families. In this scene, they're all wearing different shades of blue. Lady Frances being the darkest, the next darkest being Jane, followed by Catherine, and the palest of the shades with green trim is worn by Margaret, the youngest. So even in their coloring of their clothes here, as they're standing next to each other, you can sense a hierarchy. So they receive the Duke of Leicester, and after he's been welcomed with a meal, we get a scene where he's putting up his disgusting feet on the table and is eyeing up Catherine and tells Jane to stop reading and that she should smile more. I mean, this man is terrible. We hate him. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you will notice him as the head of the Citadel. And I could not stop thinking of that as I'm watching him put his infested feet up on the table. Gross. The Duke of Leicester proudly and joyously announces that he has news. The news is that he has secured Jane a husband and she is to be married. Ooh, at this point, we are less than 10 minutes into the series and our narrator hits us with, oh shit. Jane quite literally loses her shit at the table and is taken away by her mother. Lady Frances pulls her aside and informs her that she will be marrying Guilford Dudley, which by Jane's reaction seems to have quite the reputation. Vile, I believe, is the word that Jane uses. And then she goes on to say, he's the last man in the world who I could ever be prevailed upon to marry. Lol. She doesn't say exactly like that, but she almost says exactly like that, minus some words. And so we get our first little morsel on this trail to enemies to lovers. Girl, as soon as you said you wasn't marrying that man, we knew you were marrying that man. Tell me who you're marrying by telling me who you're not marrying.
Dead.
That's how this works.
Dead.
Lady Frances could give a shit how Lady Jane feels. She needs only to feel protected by attaching herself to the wealthy Dudley family, one way or the other. And she tells Jane, our only wealth is blood, which I thought was a killer line, actually, because their father left them with nothing. And so she has to leverage her daughter's proximity to the king, which we learn Jane is cousins to King Edward VI, and they grew up together. When Jane refuses to be used and declares that she'll do everything in her power to get out of this marriage, Lady Frances laughs in this bitch's face and tells her, girl, you have no power. Which will never not feel ironic to me, considering that she needs Jane to help secure the family's position. Feels like Jane has all the power, but also no power.
Yeah. Our only wealth is blood.
So at this moment, Jane turns to find her book of research that right at the beginning of the show let us know this is her way out to be able to become independent and earn money for herself. She turns to try to find this book and finds that Lady Frances has thrown it in the fire. So now we officially know Lady Frances is a bitch.
Yeah.
So a distressed Jane, contemplating her life, that night plans to escape. She goes to find her lady's maid, Susanna, on the receiving end of some special attentions from the stable boy. Girl.
Respect.
And we get our first instance of how this show loves to censor female pleasure. The romantic scenes are very much done with the female gaze. This was also the point where I realized that this probably was not a show that I was going to be enjoying with my young teen. Okay? There's just a bit too much pleasure and gaze. It's rated TV 14, which sometimes can be okay for a preteen. But this show definitely
pushes the edge of that.
Yeah. However, the book, I would definitely recommend the book for a young teen reader. Yes. But the show definitely pushes a bit of that line. So, Susanna, she's dessert right now, baby. It is nighttime and the stable boy needed a snack.
Oh my God.
And Susanna's ready to provide. As Jane walks in, Susanna unfortunately must halt to help Jane. And Susanna tries to convince her that she doesn't know enough about the world to try to run away. And now for somebody like Jane, she hears that and sees that shit as a challenge. Like, oh, I don't know enough of the world? Bye, my way. And Susanna brings up the dangers of the Ethians and the Pax and the threat of civil war currently going on in the country. Things that she thinks Jane might not know about. And Jane won't hear it. She's like, anything is better than feeling trapped in my own home and being bartered by my mother. She pleads with Susanna to help her and shows her that she has actually stolen her mother's ring because she knows that they'll need money. So see, Susanna, I know some stuff. I'm willing to commit some crime. Susanna agrees and they leave in the night. Do they get far? No, they don't get far. By dawn, Lady Frances, with the help of horsemen and some tracking dogs, found them.
Oh, it's very kid runs away from home with an action figure in his backpack.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So, upon finding Jane and Susanna, Lady Frances accuses Susanna of 1, taking Jane, and 2, stealing her ring, and threatens to have her put in jail and hung. Susanna, at this point, looks to Jane and goes, girl, I'm sorry. And transforms into a hawk and flies away. So now you're about 12 minutes into the show and we have fantastical creatures. At this point, the narrator chimes in to explain the existence of Ethians. And the narrator explains Ethians are shapeshifters and everyone else is a Verity. And the Verity spread lies about Ethians, calling them the devil's spawn and accusing them of trying to destroy the Verity way of life. King Henry, during his reign, exiled them to the wilderness and they were not allowed to mix with Verities. So in the book, Ethianism was made legal by King Henry VIII. In the book, King Henry VIII discovered that he was an Ethian himself. And once he realized that he also held this power, Ethianism, which was illegal before his reign, he then proclaimed it to be legal. And that being only 1 generation ago, for Jane's young generation, people, Verities, were still pretty afraid of Ethianism and still discriminated against Ethians, even though it was not illegal. So that's how it's written in the book. Here in the series, they decided to make it fully illegal to be Ethian and illegal to intermingle with Ethians. They weren't jailed, but they were shunned out of regular society. In the book, Jane herself grew up admiring Ethians and wishing to be one. But in the series, they kind of make it seem as though she's heard of Ethians, has never met one, doesn't know a lot about it, and now finding out that one of her best friends is an Ethian, goes to researching. So at what seems to be later in the day, we see Jane contemplating out of a window. As the narrator says, real life as we know it can be a real kick in the tits.
Okay.
And her sisters, Catherine and Margaret, give her shit about her mood as they play pretend sword fighting. Again, in subtle ways, challenging some of those gender norms of the time. Jane notices Lady Frances is getting ready to leave. Catherine tells her that Lady Frances is actually heading to London to see the Dudleys about Jane's wedding. Now, Lady Frances had no intention of including Jane in any conversation regarding her wedding.
Yeah.
She was just gonna up and leave. Thanks to Catherine letting Jane know that that's what she was doing, Jane decides to follow her. And we see Lady Frances head down river in a barge. Jane rushes out behind her, jumps in another barge, and tells the bargeman in a very New York taxi fashion, "Follow that barge." Okay. And it's also a fast-ass barge because Jane arrives right behind her mother, just as Lord Dudley, played by Rob Brydon, opens up the gate and greets them both. As they walk in, Lord Dudley has full wedding preparations going on. Jane just found out the day before.
Oh, God.
These wedding preparations are fully underway. There's a full menu. There's French music picked out. He's even selected specific tapestries for the decor. And poor Jane, who was there to try to have some say and at least try to meet this Guildford, is told that she can't because he's not around, and is really made to feel quite insignificant in this whole scenario. So with the last bit of pride that she has in the face of her mother and this Lord Dudley, she decides to stand her ground and announce that she won't be marrying Guildford. And Lord Dudley looks at her, smiles, and says, "Nobody cares what you want." And they turn around and leave her in the hall standing on her own.
God.
Jesus. As a woman, you're watching this and you're in a full rage. You're pissed. And if you pay close attention to Lord Dudley, you will notice on Dudley's left ear a large pearl earring. Nadja, tell us what a large pearl earring means.
Guys, if you remember, if you're OGs, if you've been with us for a while, we talked about this during the Mary and George episode because George, towards the end of the series, was often wearing a large singular pearl earring. This earring was a symbol of proximity and power, proximity to the king and power in his court. The bigger the earring, the more power and influence you likely had.
Before we had slutty little glasses, we had a slutty little pearl earring.
It's cunty.
So that just gives you a glimpse of what Jane is up against. Even though she's related to the king, she still does not have the same pull and influence that this Lord Dudley most likely has. With no other option, she sees herself out. On the way back to the river to catch her high-speed barge, she comes across some dude in pink fucking parachute pants. In Nadja's opinion, this is the hottest guy in the series.
All right, listen, okay. This is what I'll say in my defense. People who know me...
I wasn't attacking you.
People who know me in person probably know what my husband looks like. And then it makes sense.
And that would be almost like identical to...
Not identical.
Sir Stan Dudley.
I don't need that. Shut your mouth.
And he, like your husband, is a cutie patootie. I mean, he bagged you, baby, so he's got to have something.
A very good sense of humor.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
In no relation to Ryan, just specifically this character, this guy not only looks like a jackass in his fucking parachute pants, the style of the time, but fucking acts like one too, as he teases and pushes around some poor little kids. Jane, seeing this, runs to the defense of the kids and asks the kids for this guy's name. And they answer with, "That's Lord Dudley's son."
Ay.
So Jane looks at this Lord Dudley in disbelief that this might be the man that she's going to have to marry. As the narrator goes, unconfucking-ceivable. That's a little shout out to Wallace Shawn in The Princess Bride.
Let's go. Inconceivable.
Cute little homage there. So Jane, now desperate for help, gets the idea to visit her beloved cousin, King Edward, played by Jordan Peters. Can I tell you, it tickled me to see a black King Edward. I loved it. I was like, yep, I'll take it. Love it. We meet King Edward riding out to greet soldiers, and he coughs to let us know
that he's sick and dying.
The narrator gives us a rundown of Edward's reign. He became king at 9 after his father Henry VIII died, and the whole ruling of the kingdom part was practically done by his counselors. One of them being Lord Seymour, played by Dominic Cooper, who hands him an anti-Ethian proclamation in this scene that Edward refuses to read out loud, and he ends up going off script, not mentioning Ethians a single time, letting us know that he's sympathetic to the livelihoods of the Ethians. In the book, Edward, just like Jane, also dreamt of becoming an Ethian. actually even more than Jane, because he has traceable Ethian blood, but just hadn't presented any powers.
The divergence between the show and the book is honestly like kind of wild. Like, because it's not even necessarily that every single event is changed or every timeline is changed, but it is that like these fundamental pieces that world build for us are changed, and I feel like it makes the book and the show two separate entities.
It's not even that it was that many things that were altered. They really do stick to the big plot points. It's just that what they do alter changes the tone of the story.
Exactly.
I think that's where most of the shift is in the tone.
It changes the stakes and the tone.
So for the show, they up the stakes. In the book, the stakes don't feel as high, but you're investing more time in learning about your characters and developing your characters. Whereas in the show, I feel like there's less character development outside of the main characters, but there's higher stakes overall.
Yep.
After Edward addresses his soldiers, he goes from his horse to his wheelchair to hold court in the throne room. Seymour brings up Ethians again and announces that some were caught sneaking into a nearby town and will be sentenced to death for violating the division laws, which prohibits Ethians from entering Verity settlements. Settlements, you mean where people live? Yeah. Edward orders him to return the Ethians to the wild instead of killing them. Now, I just want to point out, he says return Ethians to the wild. This is the rhetoric, if you will, that they use to describe these people who turn into animals. They're not animals. They don't live as animals. They live most of the time in their human form. Therefore, to say return them to the wild is crazy. It's crazy.
It's giving white moderate. Not hurt, but not help them.
You can definitely say that Edward, in this case, definitely fits that description in that he doesn't want to hurt these people or Ethians, but he's also not necessarily trying to help them either. Mm-hmm. His way of keeping the peace is keeping them separate. Again, in context of the story and history, King Edward at this time was probably 15 years old. So he's not necessarily the one ruling his kingdom. His advisories are. We definitely see a divergence in his receiving of this news and how he chooses to deal with them. The courts want them hung and killed, and he wants them at least not hurt.
At least.
So as a viewer, you start to question any information that he's receiving from his own counselors. At this moment, Jane walks into the court and catches Edward's eye as she enters the throne room. At the sight of Jane, he gets the cutest, widest smile on his face. He gets so happy to see Jane. And so you automatically see the relationship that they have. He announces her presence and immediately dismisses everyone out of the court. They go out to the garden to take some air, and they have this really super cute dynamic. He calls her Janie. You can tell that they cared about each other very much, platonically. As they stroll through the garden, Jane shares her terrible news, which is that she is being forced to marry and she's looking to Edward to intervene. But it turns out that Edward has already approved the marriage himself.
Ooh, ugh.
Pissed this was done without her consent, she yells that she does not want to be a wife. And he's like, girl, tell me about it, because I don't want to be here either. I don't want to die, and here I am. Here he confesses to her that he has the affliction, the fatal disease of all diseases in all the land.
The affliction.
In real life, he died of tuberculosis at the age of 15. At the time, it was known as consumption. So as Jane and Edward talk about their roles in their real worlds, in their own worlds, in their realms, we are introduced to Princess Mary, played by Kate O'Flynn, and Princess Elizabeth, played by Abby Hearn. And as they come into the shot, the narrator describes them as the discarded offspring of two of King Henry's most unfortunate wives. Yikes. And then the narrator goes on to explain that although Edward was the youngest, he was the first to get the throne because of his penis.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Listen, there were times where the narrator felt like a lot for me, But there were times where I thought it was hilarious. And this was one of those times. The princesses go out to the garden for some sport when Edward and Jane arrive to greet them. And right after they greet their brother and their cousin Jane, Mary runs to Edward with a blackberry pie and insists that he has to have some because it's his favorite. As soon as this man takes a bite of this pie, he goes into a complete coughing fit and falls to the ground choking. Who are the only two people to rush to his side? Jane and Elizabeth, who they call Bess.
Yeah.
Jane quickly directs Bess to bring lilac flowers that are planted nearby, and Jane seemingly chews it up for Edward to be able to ingest it. The show's reminding us she's smart. She's an herbalist. And I just want to point out that she shoved a whole ass leaf into this man's mouth. It wasn't chewed. It wasn't chewed. They didn't try to make it look like it was chewed. A whole ass leaf. Anyway, the plant helps revive him and he can breathe again. Seymour and Mary look on, almost disappointed that the king is breathing. Seymour forcibly and unkindly escorts Jane to a carriage to send her off on her way. So we are left suspicious, but we're going to put a pin on that. We turn to King Edward in his chambers being tended to by the fool of a doctor that is Dr. Butts. Okay. He is played by Kevin Eldon, who I personally remember from watching Sanditon. He sure is. He is the minister in Sanditon.
Yes.
Dr. Butts, his key suggestions for Edward as he detaches leeches from the king's feet are to have some boiled kitten tea with some urine.
They really ham up the doctor stuff and the food that they eat on this show.
They really
do. It's really, really funny because it kind of plays to the assumptions that a lot of us already have about how people did medicine and shit back then. But like, boiled kitten tea, famously medicinal boiled kitten tea.
With urine, specifically old man's urine.
Yes, let's go.
Preferably, it's better. It's more fermented. So, yay. Edward graciously declines. And after all of this, Lord Dudley arrives into the chamber. And him and Lord Seymour recommend that the king should probably, at this point, appoint a successor. Seymour has conveniently already written up the paperwork that pronounces that Mary should be Edward's rightful heir, which honestly, technically is what makes the best sense, as she was already overlooked for the throne before Edward. But Dudley interjects and argues that Mary might be illegitimate. He makes the case that her mother, Catherine, King Henry's first wife, was originally married to King Henry's brother, Arthur. And well, Catherine got that marriage annulled, only claiming that they never consummated.
That he died before they were able to consummate their marriage.
And then this man goes, and who are we kidding? Spaniards? Yo, reckless. That is some reckless shit.
Really, really funny. That's really funny.
Oh my God. Whoa. And then they follow that up with discarding Bess as a choice because her mother in this story happens to be Ethian. Dudley ends up suggesting that there might be a candidate with royal blood who's currently engaged to a highborn Verity house who could wear the crown until a male heir is born. And Edward immediately feeds right into this and goes, Lady Jane Grey? And Dudley like, oh, wow.
Oh my God,
I would have never thunk it. What? You are so smart. Seymour brings up the happy coincidence of Jane's husband-to-be literally being Lord Dudley's son. And that would make him the grandfather to the eventual heir to the throne. So the deception and the disgrace. King Edward, without saying who, makes his choice, rolls up his paper, and uses his ring to imprint the royal seal on the wax. Look, guys, and I know, I know you don't want me to keep doing this, but I'm going to bring it up, okay? I'm going to bring it up because they wanted me to bring it up, because they chose to do a close-up shot. And if you're doing a close-up shot, it's because you want me to see stuff. They do a close-up shot of him imprinting the wax, and the wax is already imprinted and dry on the paper. And I know that doesn't matter, and it's not a big deal to everyone or anyone. The shit irks me. Okay, I can't. If it's already going to be dry on the paper, don't do a close-up. Anyway. He seals his will and orders it stored safely until the event of his death. That evening, Seymour returns to Edward with another one of Mary's blackberry pies, but this time Edward is sitting with his dog, and as soon as the dog smells the pie, it barks and bites Seymour. That's it. The dog told us that's it.
You're done.
You're done. You're done. As the viewer, you're watching this like, nope, Seymour's done. If I had any doubt, it's gone now. Mm-hmm. He's terrible. Seymour orders the dog to be killed, but Edward refuses and dismisses him. Deception and disgracio. Back to Jane, who Seymour sent away. It turns out a wheel has fallen off of the carriage she was sent in. So she convinces the carriage driver to allow her to borrow a horse so she could get home faster. She rides off with not one single intention of going home. She sees this as her chance to escape. At the sight of some Kingsland guards, she decides to find somewhere to hide and comes across a tavern. The Donna's I Don't Like You Anyway is playing inside. She walks in as a fight breaks out, but a handsome, dark-haired man intervenes in this fight. And Jane watches as he climbs onto the bar and recites a poem in Latin to the crowd. Their eyes meet. And Jane walks slowly towards him as the narrator reassures the viewer that there is no such thing as love at first sight, but that lust at first sight is definitely a thing.
Accurate.
So Jane walks across the room, walks up to this man, and hits him with the line, "So do you come here often?"
Dios mío.
What? And just when you're about to cringe, just when you're about to be like, girl, no, what? The narrator chimes in and says, Jane's the first person in history to use that line. And now you're cracking up, because that could have been terrible. And this conversation between Jane and this gentleman immediately goes south. They start bickering right off the bat, right? Like a battle of wits, if you will, to the point that it almost makes them more intriguing to each other. And just as they ask each other who they are, a couple of men approach the bar. The man behind the bar lets them know, yo, I don't want any trouble. The bartender asks them to leave. Just as he asks them to leave, some Kingsland guards enter looking for an Ethian criminal named Archer. The handsome dark-haired man grabs Jane's arm and tries to get her to leave with him, to which she responds, as if, and pushes him off. Okay, so here's where I was like, all right, guys, I get it. You're funny and funky. Okay.
This is not a regular script. It's a cool script.
You did it a few times. You don't got to keep doing it. Okay, but we're here. We're having a good time. A bar fight ensues when the gentleman that the Kingsland Guard is looking for shows himself and turns into a fucking bear. Chaos ensues. The handsome dark-haired man grabs Jane by the arm, and this time she lets him pull her away into an alcove under the stairs. As he tries to open the back door under the stairs, she watches everything going on. Ethians transforming left and right, and people fighting the guards and each other. Chaos. Suddenly, a hawk flies in and transforms into Susanna, who warns everyone that more guards are coming. At the sight of Susanna, Jane wants to run out and catch up to her, but the dark-haired stranger with the wide-set eyes grabs onto her and in very close proximity whispers, "Come with me." And there's heat and there's panting and there's an almost kiss. But Jane snaps out of it and runs to Susanna. And this is when you're like, oh, okay, chemistry, I see you. Susanna and Jane start apologizing to each other. When the captain of the Kingsland Guard grabs them both, Jane pushes Susanna out of the door as she transforms and flies away. Jane is then added to the crowd of Ethians awaited to be dunked. Dunking is when they tie up a prisoner and hold them upside down underwater to try to force a transformation and prove that they are Ethian. Mm-hmm. However, if they are not Ethian, they'll just drowned.
Jesus.
So, great.
It's giving witch hunt.
Great process there, for sure. And just as Jane's turn to get dunked approaches, Lady Frances arrives and rescues her. In the carriage on their way back home, Jane makes her final plea to get out of the wedding, and Lady Frances warns her that if she doesn't marry Guilford Dudley, she'll have to make Catherine marry the gross Duke of Leicester. Dios mío. So now this gives Jane an ultimatum. Back to Edward, still in his chambers, his dinner arrives, but before he can dig into his delicious plate of eels, his dog, Petunia, we learn her name is, transforms into a girl, a naked girl. Right? Because, okay, another deviation from the book. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm so sorry. Technically, when an Ethian transforms, their clothes does not transform with them, right? That's not how...
Yeah, it's not how shape-shifting works.
Hello, we've all seen shapeshifters
Oy,
in
oy, oy.
movies. Obviously, depending on the size of the animal they are, their clothes either rips apart or doesn't fit on their body. Yeah. So when they transform back into their human form, they are meant to be naked. Realistically, quote unquote, in a fantasy land.
That would make more sense to me.
And that's how it is in the book. In the book, anytime somebody shifts into the Ethian form, they have to figure out their clothes situation when they're going to transform back into their human form.
And that's how it happens in Twilight when Jacob turns into a werewolf. Guys,
hello,
he rips every t-shirt he owns. So
I'm assuming for ease of storytelling, right? And for ease of production costs and time, decides to ignore that detail. We can get over that. We're watching a fantasy. She tries to warn Edward that he doesn't have the affliction. Actually, he's being poisoned, and informs him that he has a great-grandmother who he believes is dead but is actually alive, and she has sent her to protect him. As Petunia in human form stands in front of the king, the narrator chimes in to let us know Edward's made two important revelations. One, what we just learned, he's being poisoned. And two, he is not interested in women.
Let's go. That's a journey I'm going to take with you, Edward.
As that's going on, Mary visits Seymour in his chambers. And guess what? They kiss because they're romantically involved.
In a way that I hate.
Not only are they romantically involved, they're in on this plot. He confirms that the will has been signed, which excites her, and she vows to be queen and cleanse the country of all of its Ethians.
Insane.
Now, Seymour chooses to leave out the very important piece of information that Edward did not disclose whether it was Mary who he assigned in his will. She does not know that she is currently in competition with Lady Jane Grey. Also coming up with plans, we have Jane, who the next day, while she's in the bath, continuing to contemplate the imminence of this damned wedding, she cannot stop thinking about the quote-unquote intriguing and infuriating young man from the tavern. Margaret walks in, torturing some doll with fake blood. And this gives Jane an idea. We just see her and Margaret whispering to each other, and then we start to get a montage of everybody getting ready for the big wedding. All under a cover of U2's Vertigo by Alice Merton. We see everyone getting ready for these nuptials. The king is donning his robe and his crown. Jane is getting her hair done. And we get this very hilarious bit of the Dudley men trying to pick out a codpiece. So the codpiece at the time was a padded bit that would go in front of the crotch area, originally meant to like shield, protect the male genitalia from the fashions of the time. But soon it became a fashion accessory among the nobles that symbolized virility and masculinity.
Dicks. Penis.
Yep. Apparently, there was nothing more masculine than a padded, ruffle-trimmed dildo hanging in front of your pants.
Oh, no.
That's fun and exciting. We should bring that back.
So another thing that would happen with codpieces was that people would frequently get one that was too big and then stuff it.
Yep. Dudley's dad actually ends up picking the largest of his collection, passes it to his son, and says, leave them wanting less.
What the fuck?
That shit sent me.
What the fuck?
Like, what? Okay. We finally get to see Jane in her dress. She looks absolutely stunning in this white dress. But her mother won't let you know that. Because she's a bitch.
Yeah.
We finally arrive to the dreaded wedding, an evening ceremony. As Jane walks down the aisle with Edward at her side, we see Lord Dudley and his son proudly waiting at the end of the aisle. They're both wearing all blue, a light blue color. And as Jane approaches the altar and the camera pans in her POV, her point of view, she, along with us, the viewer, starts to realize that there's a man dressed in this dark navy actually standing at the altar, which happens to be behind where we thought the Dudley men were. The groom comes into view and turns out to be the man from the tavern.
Crazy. Life is crazy.
If you didn't assume that was going to happen from the beginning.
Yeah, you're cooked. Your brain's cooked.
Okay. But as the viewer still experiencing that for the first time, you're like, yes. You're waiting to see the reactions. We see at the altar this wonderfully short king with his dark, gorgeous, curly hair, heavy brow.
You're wild.
He's very average height, okay? He's very average height. He's fine.
A wild person. Okay, go on. Oh my God.
With his dark, gorgeous, curly hair, his heavy brow, his wide set eyes, his thick ass neck. You know what they say about thick necks?
Big collars.
Whoop. Yep. And just as this realization dawns on both of them, the music distorts. They immediately recognize each other. They're both stunned as the narrator goes, "Oh, yes. Frequenter of taverns, seeker of trouble, son of Lord Dudley, and lust object of one Lady Jane Grey. Let me present Jane's husband-to-be, Lord Guilford Dudley."
Trippin'.
Ooh. It's so good. That whole little sequence, so good. Eat it up. And as they're starting their vows, they're stumbling over their words. Both of them do some really good eye acting. All in their eyes, they're portraying surprise, reluctance at being there in the first place, but a slight delight in who they get to be there with, who they're forced to be there with.
Because at least they find them hot.
Guilford delivers his vows with pause, but with a mix of tenderness. We get that right away. He has this humbleness in his eyes that honestly really do get me every time. That you really do see in this scene where he's like perceiving Jane. When it's Jane's turn to give her vows, Guilford notices there's something in her mouth. And Jane herself seems to almost have forgotten that she had a plan because red dye starts to leak from her mouth. And it's almost like she remembers, oh, I have to cough. She coughs into her hand and immediately faints and falls to the ground. Margaret, her youngest sister, points and screams, "The affliction!" As King Edward tries to go to Jane's aid, he goes into a coughing fit and has to be sat down. Everyone starts losing their shit. From the ground, Jane opens one eye and sneaks a peek at Guilford, who's looking dead at her with a smirk and shaking his head. And that's the end of the episode. If you ask me, that's a great first episode. You're locked in and you want to see what's going to happen, how this wedding is going to keep going, what's going to happen with Jane and Guilford. Everything's served up. You know what you're in for. If you go on to episode 2, you're with the shits.
And guys, if there's anything that you know about us here, we are, in fact, with the shits. Join us. We get in to episode 2, titled Wild Thing. Oi. The Amazon episode description reads, quote, "What's worse, when you have the raging horn for an unmitigated scoundrel, or when he has a deep, dark secret that could get you both killed?" Unquote. Guys, this is starting out juicy. Paola and I have slightly different opinions, I think, on the narration in the show and the function of the narration and how it's done. Per usual, this episode opens with some Love Island ass narration. That was my first thought. Episode 1, the narrator comes on, and I'm like, and a new bombshell enters the villa. Like, it's giving Love Island. I don't know. You can fight with me in the comments, but I was just like, what is this narrator doing? I consider this show to be quite goofy. That's not a bad thing. The goofiness of the show, the foundation of that goofiness is the narration.
Yes.
Everything being the same, obviously with a bit of added context in the scenes, but without the narrator would have made for a very different show.
So as like you would have preferred a less...
I would have preferred either less narration,
silly?
None of it, or if we're going to have this much narration, for it to be like a little less saucy.
Got it. Let the characters have the
exactly, because it does feel like a teeny tiny bit cheap. I understand that it's entertaining, like the narrator says really funny stuff, obviously provides context, and that follows the construction of the book. The book is told by this quote-unquote in the future historian that is telling you about Jane Grey's real life. It's what the history books don't tell you. And so the narrator is very saucy and very funny and like sarcastic and shit like that in the book. Like the narrator really is their own character.
I wonder why they made the narrator in the series male
instead of female,
as opposed to female, if there's so much around the female perception. Because let me tell you, one of my favorite things about listening to the book in an audio format was the female narrator. And maybe because the female narrator comes off more as Jane's thoughts as opposed to just telling the story.
I think it could have been a different narrator. They could have done like a Lady Whistledown almost situation, not as a...
Maybe they didn't want it to be too Bridgerton.
Which I could see that too, but I don't think men needed to be involved. So... we get a close-up of Jane from above in what looks like a fucking dungeon after her dramatic fainting spell, where she quietly says, bollocks. Lady Jane Grey is on Dr. Butts' table, so we already know him to be a pristine clinician, where he tries to identify whether she has the affliction that King Edward is believed to have. Jane is chained to a fucking table, like literally chained with her wrists cuffed to the table, and kind of continues for a couple seconds trying to play into having the affliction. As soon as Dr. Butts tries to suggest all of the like fucking medical shit that he could do, which includes bleeding from her feet to, I don't know what that does. She's like, no, dog, no. Thank you. I'm so good. You know what? I think it was a fluke. I think I'm great. I think I'm doing just fine. Dr. motherfucking Butts takes some of the blood that's...
Dr.
motherfucking Butts takes some of the blood that's come out of her mouth. Remember, this is fake blood. Jane has done a goof, right? Inspired by her sister. And we get information from the narrator that's like, this quote-unquote blood is made up from dried beetle shells and honey crystals that Jane chewed up and put in her mouth. This doctor tastes the blood to see if it's good. So, listen, the fact that Dr. Butts has made it this far in life, I'm stunned. I'm shocked. Tastes the blood and goes, oh, it's sweet. You don't have the affliction.
What would it have tasted like if you did?
As soon as he's like, well, we can bleed you from your feet. I can cut you open. I love knives. Jane is like, no. I'm so good. Like,
he's a sadist.
Literally. She's like, let's fucking get back to it. Her mom appears at the fucking door of this fucking dungeon, and she's like, yeah, I thought you'd want to get married, you dumb bitch. Goes back to the church, where she is swiftly married to Lord Guilford Dudley. This is all happening late at night. She gets back into the church, which is like kind of dimly lit by candles. It's giving very the lower levels of Hogwarts, you know? And they like go to a banquet hall to have this like between the families and guests dinner. At the wedding reception, Jane and Guilford bicker about like really, really trivial things. They don't seem to be able to have like an actual conversation. Lady Frances takes Jane aside and tries to convince her to appreciate the marriage, right? She argues with her like, this is a big deal, right? Like not just for you, but for our family. Suck it up. We needed to do this. Jane says, quote, tell me, mother, did they offer you a good price or was I a bargain? Unquote. Lady Frances responds, quote, I would have paid them to take you. End quote. Cold as ice, my lady. Lord Dudley, at the same time that Jane is having this conversation with Lady Frances, similarly tries to convince his son to at least pretend that he's happy with the match. And here's a trope that I'm not a big fan of. They're clearly really attracted to each other, but they're both frustrated that they were forced into marriage, that they don't know each other yet. They don't know each other's personalities. I tire of the whole, I like them, but no. I like them, but I am keeping it from myself. Also, especially in like this type of era where it's like, dog, you're already married. Like, you're already married. Just do the damn thing. If you like each other, just, I don't know, just.
It's a very frustrating trope.
It
I don't
is.
think there's anyone that isn't frustrated by that trope. It's almost more satisfying when you're seeing an actual enemies to lovers.
Yes, absolutely it is, because it's like,
this is kind of like you're just gatekeeping from yourself.
Because it's like enemies to lovers, you have concrete reasons to dislike each other. This, you guys bickered for 10 seconds at a fucking inn where you were going to get arrested for like being near Ethians. And guess what? Now you're getting married. You know fuck all about each other, except that Guilford seems to have a reputation for maybe being a womanizer, carousing at night, drinking, partying, shit like that.
Yeah, but even after all the lust at first sight.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you're at this point is a trust issue. She doesn't know if she can trust him based on what she's heard about his past. I think he's dealing with guilt more than anything else. And you find out why.
Right. Okay, I see that perspective. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of Paola teaching Nadhya how to watch TV and movies.
Shut up.
As Lord Dudley is trying to convince Guilford that he should be acting, at the very least, happy about this marriage, Guilford's brother Stan tries to charm Lady Frances. And it kind of seems to be working, because from what we've already learned about her, Lady Frances don't give a fuck. She'll do what she's got to do. She'll say what she's got to say. I know she's supposed to be like a bit of a villain. I fuck with her character so hard. She's hysterical.
I think our problem is like as a mother.
Oh, for sure.
Is
She's
how
a terrible
we judge
mother.
her. As a character,
Hysterical.
she's hysterical. I stand.
So Lady Frances and Lord Stan are seated next to each other at the dinner table. Lady Frances says, quote, "So Stan, tell me about you," end quote. "My fiance has the plague." "Oh, bad luck. My husband is dead." "Ah, bad luck indeed." "What?"
And then they give eyes at each other.
And then they cheers. They clink their glasses together. They cheers. And I love them both. Wow, they're so fucking funny. And I just want to call out, as Paola was doing, right, throughout her retelling of the first episode, there are significant differences between the book and the show. One of those differences is that Stan, Guilford's brother, is already married. And he has children. And Stan and Guilford don't have a great relationship. That kind of carries into the show as well. But it seems like in the book, it's not even they don't have a great relationship. It's like they don't even fucking talk. Also, in the book, this will become significant later on in the show, both of the Dudley parents are still alive. In the show, as we will come to find out, Lady Dudley is nowhere to be seen. That is because she is deceased. And this becomes a plot point later on. And even though both the Dudley parents are still alive in the book, their relationship is not a happy one. So that already feeds into Guilford's apprehension of marriage, because the marriage that he has grown up around, has had the most intimate contact with, is a dysfunctional, unhappy one. Jane and Guilford, kind of throughout this banquet party, continue bickering, and he asks how she faked the blood in the church. Listen, that would be the perfect time to become little accomplices, because he clearly thinks it's funny. Like, the way he asks is like, "How'd you do it? Like, how'd you get the blood in your mouth?" And she will not give him an inch. Like, she's just like, "How do you know the blood is fake? Maybe I have the affliction. Maybe you have the affliction. Maybe we're all gonna die." And he was like, "Yeah, promise?" Like,
yeah, that would be great.
Literally,
Thanks.
please.
I think he tries a couple of times and she's just not.
She doesn't give him anything.
She's not with it. She doesn't know.
Again, not that she has to, right? I'm not trying to say that women should always acquiesce to men and fawn over them. No. But it does seem like he's making a little bit more of an effort, at least to make her comfortable, at the very least to not be bickery hatey towards each other, and she's just not having it. Jane sees her youngest sister, Margaret, reaching for wine and admonishes her by saying, "Margaret, you're 8. She's either 8 or 10. I wrote 8. But she's like, "You're 8. Beer only." Which I genuinely thought was really, like, I cackled at that. Also, I am duty bound to relay the following. Quote, this is from howstuffworks.com. Yep. The idea that people primarily drank beer throughout the Middle Ages is widespread and also wrong. A number of records from medieval times, obviously medieval times are a few centuries before the events of the Tudor dynasty, but alas, if anything, I feel like that validates more what this is saying. A number of records from medieval times report that water was plentiful and common. Medieval people weren't stupid. They didn't drink water that looked or smelled bad. And tradesmen that used water, such as tanning, like treating leather, faced hefty fines if they polluted the town's drinking supply. Beer may not have been a replacement for water, but it was viewed as a more nutritious alternative than water, even though it was weakly brewed from barley. At the time, beer was a calorie-laden beverage that pulled double duty with workers and farmers who were thirsty and in need of energy.
Oh, so like the common Red Bull.
The commoner's Red Bull. And just like a common beverage to have. They weren't avoiding water. And I think that's like a common misconception, that people just didn't fucking drink water and only drank beer. And it's like, yeah, a lot of them were drunk.
That's all you see, I'm sure.
Yeah, like a lot of them were drunk a lot of the time, and that's their business. So as Jane is going back and forth with her sisters, who are both there, she's reminded of the bedding ceremony.
Goodness.
As she remembers, oh fuck, the bedding ceremony. And maybe we as the viewer are like, wait, what's that officially? Dudley, the elder Dudley, raises a toast to the union of his son and Jane Grey. Bess sends her best wishes during his toast on King Edward's behalf. King Edward, who is definitely too ill to have been part of this banquet. Quote, there is no soul he holds in higher esteem than Jane, end quote. Bess lets the crowd know that good King Edward is alive and safe, even though there are like hecklers in this banquet hall that are like, girl, you know Edward's dying. And she's like, shut up.
I think, and this is a point where you see Bess like stand up for her brother.
Yes.
Not only stand up for her brother, but show some strength, I think,
She's
in
very
like this
meek
room full of people.
and mild-mannered.
That's how you perceive her, because she's quiet.
Yep.
But then she has these moments where you see her take charge of the room and check people. It's almost like the show telling you this is how she became the Queen Elizabeth that you know.
You'll eventually know. Yes.
Yeah. Sad that we're not going to get her in a season 2 yet.
Yeah.
I am hoping this show gets picked up. So I don't want to say anything final like, oh, we're not going to get to see yet.
We'll see.
Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll
It's
see.
happened before. As Bess finishes her statement, King Edward is, happy, safe, healthy, doing his best, thriving, vibing, living. The narrator informs us that he's like really not, because oh shit, dog, he's in fucking danger.
People are trying to get him killed.
I'm going to take a brief pause from describing that to call out again, as we called out in episode 1. I love that Lord Dudley has like that slutty little pearl earring on. So funny. Lord Dudley says to a very miserable looking Jane and Guilford after his little toast, smile, huh? Teeth and eyes. People love you. And it's so
Show business, baby.
It's so unhinged. I loved that so much. Like, genuinely, the actors are great. However, happening at the King's Palace, we see Lady Mary and Lord Seymour tending to Edward. A King's Guard comes into the room and informs them all that there have been more Ethian attacks on Archer's behalf. And Mary is bickering with Seymour, like, we need to fucking kill them all. See, this is what happens when you don't murder all of the Ethians. You know, the population dealing with oppression and occupation, being denied their humanity, lashing out against us. It sounds like they're terrorists. So,
oh man, no, but the Ethians are the one encroaching on our settlement.
just keep it separate. If they live over there and don't fight against any of our incredibly restrictive and repressive rules, we won't have any problems.
All they got to do is stay on their side and not make a living like we do.
Oh, man, we can draw lots of comparisons. Girls love nothing more than drawing comparisons,
Let's go.
arriving at conclusions.
Let's think about it.
After Princess Mary and Lord Seymour exit Edward's chamber, Petunia turns into a human. I just want to call out that Petunia, human Petunia, is the same actress that played the prince's sister in Amazon's Cinderella.
Oh, Nikki G's sister.
Starring none other than Nikki G. He gets one mention per episode. That is the contract we've drawn up with him. And Petunia tells Edward that she could smell the poison. Uh-oh. She suggests that they sneak to the market within the next few days and find the person who sold the poison in order to backtrack and find out who is trying to poison the king. She says that the poison smells like a mix of like berries and poo-poo. And I was like,
Why? Okay.
okay. Petunia asks Edward to promise once he punishes the person trying to kill him. The punishment he suggests, by the way, is boiling them alive. No. Once he boils the person alive who is poisoning him, he will go visit his grandmother. Edward agrees. He seems more excited about the boiling, though. Meanwhile, at the wedding banquet, Jane is trying to control the fact that she's, like, really into Guilford.
The Raging Horn. as the kids call it.
I've never seen a single kid who calls liking someone the raging horn.
They did in 1553.
No, they didn't.
You don't know that. The narrator knew that, though. He was there.
I'm dead. I'm weak. I'm limping. Okay. Jane's youngest sister, Margaret, forces Jane and Guilford into a kiss in front of the entire banquet hall.
Of course.
Leads to the entire wedding party cheering for them to kiss. Guilford does a dramatic spin to Jane, dips her low on the ground, and pretends to kiss her, gets 2 inches away from her face, and backs out, leaving her hanging, saying, as if.
Oh, man.
Okay. In case you missed the first Clueless reference, I needed to bring in the second one. So you don't miss it. Pay attention. Jane spots an incredibly hot Ethan trying to steal some of her wedding gifts from another chamber adjacent to the banquet hall. She comes upon him because she followed a cat who suspiciously exited the banquet hall. She follows this suspicious cat to the gift room where the cat has turned into hot Ethan man trying to pilfer her things. She stops him, goes, I know what you are. You're fucking Ethan. And he's like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to get out of here, though. She stops him before he flees and asks about Susanna, who was her former lady's maid. The guy states, we don't all know each other before fleeing. Cue the laugh track about any minority being asked this question at the hands of a white person.
I have a friend from the Dominican Republic.
Do you know her? Her name is just Maribelquis, and
I visited Punta Cana one time.
Have you ever been there? Do you go there?
Not Maribelquis. A white person didn't say that.
Yasmera Belkis?
Mary? We called her Mary.
We called her Belle. But Jane, after having this run-in with an Ethan in the gift room, makes it back to the banquet hall. Eventually, as this night wears on, Jane and Guilford get ready for the bedding ceremony. And this is kind of loosely explained by the narrator as they're preparing for it. This is incredibly chaotic, right? Because it seems like the entirety of the wedding party just shoves into their chambers to watch them bed. Ugh. The maids undress Jane down to her chemise. So like her slip, her very lowest undergarment, right? Because at this point in history, women did not wear, say it with me, knickers. So
knickers.
They did not have undies to pull on and off. They just wore like a loose little dress. Shit was open down there. So the maids undress Jane, again, down to her chemise.
Guilford's dad is like, I see a shoulder.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
He can't contain himself.
God forbid he sees an ankle, you know? What's he liable to do? As Jane is getting roughly undressed, Lady Frances is trying to give her some tips about how she should handle the male anatomy. Again, this woman deserves the world for how she played this role. Quote, if you're anything like me, I think you'll take to it like a duck to water. Girl. And she tells Jane, anything soft, hold softly. Anything firm, grasp firmly. I'm in my 30s, and I was like, that's really good advice.
That works. Yeah, that works. Okay.
As they're mutually getting undressed in this packed bedchamber opposite each other on separate sides of the bed, Guilford's father pressures him to, quote, seal the deal, unquote, so that Jane does not have any grounds to annul their marriage based on non-consummation. My God.
Get it in there, baby.
He's like, listen, I'll be right over here several feet away, but I do need you to have sex with this woman. It might be hard for you to take your mind off of it. That doesn't matter. I need you guys to fuck. I'll be over here, though. If you need water, let me know.
That is crazy to me. Anytime I see shit like this, I'm like, no.
I'm gonna die.
Who could ever?
I'm gonna die. The wedding guests, oh God, surround the bed as Jane and Guilford are pushed onto it. They get underneath the covers. They get under one sheet, one flat sheet. And Jane looks at Guilford with like these terrified eyes. And he's just like, all we need to do is kind of like rub up against each other a little bit and like shake our feet and they'll think we're having sex and then they'll leave. And she was like, okay. So they rub their legs together and expose their intertwined feet and everybody's like, wow, yeah. And then they all leave the room. That's like all it fucking took. My God. That's so fucking gross. That moment is kind of tender because you're like, he's trying to help her out. He's clearly not trying to take advantage of her. He's not trying to make her uncomfortable. Like, this is already such an uncomfortable situation. So you're kind of silently giving Guilford points in your mind, right? However, Jane and Guilford, as they are prone to doing, end up arguing. Guilford is kind of trying to like tell her to respect him more. He calls himself her lord, like, I'm your lord. You should follow my command. And Jane is like, fuck that. Absolutely not. And takes her goblet of wine and throws it in Guilford's face. She grabs a dressing gown and stalks into the dressing room where the door accidentally locks behind her. And Guilford is so fucking mad, he just leaves her in there and exits the room.
Oh my God. And he starts by, as soon as everybody leaves, he's like, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to open up to her about the choices that led to them being in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he starts off by saying, you know, I shouldn't have to explain myself or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where I think he's leading to talking about like things that he's dealing with. She assumes that he's talking about being a womanizer.
Mm-hmm.
And then just goes off.
Because those are the rumors that we know about Guilford.
Yes. And now he's pissed that she's gone off on this rant and
Calling
is
him a
essentially
womanizer.
calling him a womanizer. Yeah.
This is consistent from the book. Jane's whole perception of Guilford is that he's like a womanizer and like a lush, drinks and parties all the time. And that in the book, which makes more sense for a younger audience, is primarily what keeps her from wanting to be involved with him. She's like, you're gross because you're a big slut and you drink a lot. And I don't want any part of that. Yuck. That's a huge issue in the book. In the show, it almost feels like...
It feels trivial.
Exactly. It feels so trivial. And them arguing and bickering about it so much when they could have a conversation and be like, hey, so are you actually a slut? No. Oh, okay. That's enough. But, you know, if we all communicated, there would be no fun TV shows to watch. So, as our poor Lady Jane is locked in a dressing room, we cut to Lady Frances, who is having sex with Stan in a different room of the house. Oh my God. And it's like they're both fully dressed, but she's like seated in his lap. We're under the impression that like she comes and he doesn't. And she's like, yeah, whatever.
Okay,
I don't
done.
fucking care. And I was like, if I didn't like you before, babe, I love you now. So fucking funny. But that was one of the moments, in addition to like, you know, the lady's maid getting fucking eaten out in the stables. That was one of those moments where I was like, ooh, not for younger. Nope. This for adults. This for grown-ups. Lady Frances basically has sex with Stan to like loosen up his lips and get him to talk about his family's financial situation. Because she has seen certain things around their home that she's like, this doesn't feel like an element of wealth. As she has Stan in this vulnerable position, she's like, aren't you guys super rich? Like, why the fuck do parts of your castle look like shit? And Stan's like, yeah, you know, my dad loves spending money. We're like broke.
Oh, goodness.
And of course, this is after the fucking wedding, right? And he adds that Lord Dudley only accepted the proposal to marry Guilford and Jane because Jane is King Edward's cousin, and it could put his son close to the line of succession of the king. Lady Frances is pissed. Not necessarily for her daughter. She's pissed that the wool was pulled over her eyes. No one has any money now.
It's the reason why she married her daughter.
The whole reason. And she's like, well, fuck. Maybe she could have made more money if I had married her off to fucking Leicester. She wants to get more information out of Stan and kneels down on a cushion in front of him to give him a blowjob.
Squeeze it out of him.
That we see a little too much of, if you ask me. Because we don't see anything graphic, but it's like she's kneeling in front of him. We're viewing them from behind her. She's hiding his groin. Her head's bobbing up and down. And he's like making noises and stuff. And I'm like, it could have been implied. I didn't need to see this.
It's not graphic, but it's very suggestive.
I feel like it just takes the show to this place. Like, I feel like I've made comments like this already about the show being caught between two different directions. And I think it's caught between two different directions in several different aspects. Like, the show could be full goofy, full clownery, but then it has moments that are like earnest and serious. The show could be full earnest and serious, maybe with very dry humor, but it has way too much goofiness for that. The show could be sexual and steamy, but it's a young adult show. But it could be full young adult, no sex and no steam, but then it's got these scenes that kind of push it in a different direction.
Yeah. No, it definitely tries to toe a line between genres, I feel like, right? And so this is one of those instances where, yeah, you're kind of like, this feels like a young show. This feels like a show I can watch with a younger audience. And then you're like, ooh, maybe not. Could the move of making it more raunchy have trimmed down its accessibility for a wider audience?
I think a little bit, especially if you read the My Lady Jane novel, like the source material is much more tame, significantly more so. I think they barely curse. There's no sexual situations. It's just like, I want to kiss him or I want to kiss her. Like, we want to hug. Like, it's not explicit in that way.
Yeah. I mean, personally, for me, I love the raunchiness. I mean, hello, you know? I'm the warden of Horny Jail. I'm with the raunchy. I love it. But I can see how maybe if it was a little less, a younger audience could have also enjoyed this show.
Yeah, so we cut from that scene to Mary and Seymour in one of their personal chambers. So this was something that maybe Paola caught on to, but was not clear to me. I don't know whose fucking room they're in. Like, I don't know whose chambers it is. I don't know if it's Mary's. I don't know if it's Seymour's. They also seem to be alone together a lot, and nobody gives a fuck about that.
So there seems to be, up on the wall is a portrait of King Henry VIII. So this must be Mary's room.
Yeah, no one seems to give a shit about anybody spending time with anybody. Like, the rules that we choose to adhere to for this time period are pick and choose. Like, you're like... Yeah. You're putting your hand into a bag and you're picking up the rules you're going to stick to. And whatever's left inside the bag are the rules you're going to discard. So Mary is unmarried, but just hangs out with Lord Seymour all the fucking time. And by hangs out, they clearly have a relationship that is an amorous and or sexual one. So they're in her chambers together. Like, she's in a nightgown. Yes, he is in the bath. He's a naked man in a bathtub, just adjacent to, like, the bed where she's sleeping. And she's laying on this bed with comically dirty feet, just horrific feet. And it's, like, very intentional, right? That the camera angle is showing you her feet. You're supposed to be so fucking grossed out by Mary. You're supposed to find Mary so disgusting to the point where it's almost a little much. Like, again, that actress gave it everything. That actress left nothing on the field. As Lord Seymour is in this tub, right, just a ways from Mary, they're having a conversation. He's like, hey, you should come get in the tub with me. And she says, quote, you know I hate bathing. Yeah, I don't know how many times I have to tell you that, unquote. And I want to die. Seymour gets out of the tub, goes over to Mary. Like, again, they clearly have a very intimate relationship. And he, you know, kind of keeps talking to her about getting married. He has nicknames for her and stuff. He offers Mary a ring. And she insists on taking one of Lord Seymour's own rings that's already on his finger that was awarded to him by King Henry. She takes the ring and she says, my father gave you this ring, and when he bestowed it upon you, he kissed it. And Lord Seymour's like, yeah. She takes the ring off of his finger and licks it, like runs her tongue around it.
Gross.
And it's like, whatever you're trying to say about Mary's relationship to her father, I'm
We're not
out.
Sure.
I'm devastated.
Right.
I don't want to know.
You're supposed to see this as like a crazed reach for power.
Yeah. What she says after she licks this fucking ring is that now, because she has this ring that her father kissed, it means she has her father's blessing for everything she needs to do, which is obliterating Ethians across England, right? We leave that scene. Later that night, after Jane has been freed from the dressing room by a lady's maid, during the conversation with her maid, she is told that now as a married woman, she is like super duper undressed because she's just in the nightgown. She has to cover up. She has to get dressed. Her hair's down. You cannot wear your hair down. You should only be wearing your hair down around your husband for marital purposes. And Jane's like, marital purposes? And the maid is like, oh, yeah, like all men need marital purposes at least once a day. I myself like to have it twice. And you're like, girl, okay. Even Jane's whole face is like, like.
And she tells a story about a woman who didn't do it, who didn't have marital purposes frequently, and she exploded.
Her eyes exploded, and then she died.
Like, wow.
So okay. Fucking goofy. So, after this conversation with the maid, which was very funny, the maid lets her know that Lord Guilford Dudley is at the stables. He is frequently at the stables because she imagines that he likes being closer to town. Ha ha ha, he's a slut. And Jane is like, all right, sick. I'm going to go fucking get my husband. Give him a piece of my mind. She goes down to the stables, which seem to be quite a ways from the main house, and finds Guilford showering naked, like overturning like a bucket of water on himself, and he's naked. And we get like the wow, wow, wow. Like we get like that shot of him from behind. Like we see his ass. He's like running his hands through his hair. It's like very Herbal Essences ad. And he has a nice butt.
He has a great butt. This is up there with Anthony Bridgerton up against a tree, butt.
As Jane comes upon him when he's in the stable, she approaches him from behind. This is why we see his butt. She stares at him and is like lost in her lust for a second.
Mm-hmm. The raging horn.
The raging, as the kids say, the raging horn. And has to remind herself that she's fucking pissed at Guilford because he was like mean to her and also left her locked in the dressing room. And just as she is about to yell at Guilford, we see that the sun is beginning to rise. Guilford turns into a horse, leaving her shocked. What does that mean? Guilford's an Ethian. Also, I want to call out Ethian. That's how they say it on the TV show. Great. The audiobook for My Lady Jane, they insist on saying Ethian. And at some point...
Yeah, that's true.
At some point, the narrator even says, almost as if the pronunciation is called out in the text. The narrator's like, it's Ethian. Ethian. Like, says some shit like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it grinds me up so much that in the book it's Ethian and in the show it's Ethian. So they're all Ethians on the show, and we're recapping the show. Okay. Like, she's standing there staring at Horse Guilford, shocked. Lord Dudley, Guilford's father, appears at the stable literally 2 seconds later, like almost as if he was there watching and waiting for Jane to get there. It was so ungodly fast. And he's like, oh, Jane, well, now you know. Like, Guilford's a fucking horse. He's an Ethian. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, change. She's like looking at the horse and she's like, change back. I need to talk to you. Because from her limited knowledge, limited experience of Ethians, they change at will. So she's like, Guilford just changed because he felt like it. Now he's going to change back.
Right.
Not the case. We learn from Lord Dudley that Guilford cannot change back and forth at his will. He spends his days from sunup to sundown as a horse and spends his nights from sundown to sunup as a man. Yikes. When would you sleep? That sounds awful. He says, it's a real horse by day, man by night thing. And Jane says, that's not a thing. So, like...
Okay, but man by day and horse by night? That can be a thing.
Don't... Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So... At this point, Jane is, like, pissed. She's like, I'm not staying married to an Ethian. Like, what the fuck is your problem? And he goes, ooh, but now you know he's an Ethian, and you also know, since your cousin is the king, that the punishment for Ethian verity marriage is death.
Goodness gracious.
The punishment for harboring an Ethian is death.
And that's the part that's truly fucked up.
Yes, correct.
Is that they set her up.
They trap her. It's all on purpose, right? Because now that she knows that he's an Ethian, now unless she wants to die, she has to take care of him and or just hide his identity from the rest of the world. So I didn't love this. This whole thing I don't love. But now Jane is like, fuck, I guess I'm locked into this shit when I didn't want to get married in the first place. And Lord Dudley is like, anyway, you're going on a honeymoon. Get acquainted with each other. Bye. And he's like, you're leaving today. And she's like stunned, shocked. They're leaving immediately. Now Jane has to keep this big secret on top of being married when she didn't want to be to a guy that's so rude but so dreamy. When Lord Dudley is telling Jane, like, oh yeah, oopsie, my son's an Ethian. You're fucked. If you tell anyone, you'll both be killed. And she's like, God damn it. Like, what the fuck is your problem? And he says, which is kind of like a weird compliment to her, right? Because everybody kind of knows Jane to be really intelligent and like headstrong. He says intelligent people like herself are often blind to bigotry, especially the type of bigotry against Ethians. In addition to being kind of a slight compliment to Jane, it is a slight jab at the bigotry of Princess Mary.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying is like, idiots are bigots, and you're too smart to be one. And that's why you don't have it committed to memory that this relationship could have you killed. So, back at the king's castle, the main castle, King Edward and his dog, Petunia, who's now back in human form, have decided to take a trip down to the local market And he's in his plain clothes. He's in his muggle clothes, as they say. I'm joking. But he's in his plain clothes and, trying not to seem like he's a fucking royal or whatever. Apparently, he also doesn't know how to just talk to human beings. Like, we learned that Edward is, like, pretty awkward because he's been so sheltered. And they approach a flower seller, like a florist. And he's like, hey, or like she's like an apothecary, like herbologist type person. And he's like, hey, so I need something to put someone to sleep. And she's like, oh, yeah, like you can get some like whatever type of tea. Like I'll sell that to you. And he's like, no, like a permanent sleep. And she's like, no, like I don't sell that. As he's talking to her, Petunia changes into a dog and sniffs around to see if she can find the same smell that she found in the food that Edward was given by Mary. She finds it, barks, changes back into a human, holds the woman at this booth, like selling, at knife point. And it's like, who did you sell this to? This is poison. We could have you killed. Like, who did you sell this to? Obviously, she's terrified, and no one else is reacting to this at all. No one else at this market gives a single shit that this woman's life is being threatened. And she's like, all right, I sold it to some guy. I didn't know he was from the castle. I just sold it to some guy with like this funky ring that looks like an eyeball. She says something about the way he was dressed or something that lets Petunia and Edward know, oh, this is like a higher class person. So now he's like, shit. They buy the rest of it. It's like sold in a little box and they leave the market. When Jane is back at the Dudley estate trying to find her wedding gifts, to find something that she can like pawn, sell, use as bribery, get rid of, she is approached by Stan, who asks her how her first night of wedded bliss was and immediately starts making horse galloping noises.
Oh my God.
So it's like, you were in on it too, you bitch.
The way I would have slapped this man in the mouth. Like,
oh my God. He's unfortunately very funny.
Backhanded slap in the mouth.
Oh, and Jane is so fucking pissed. And then he has this like elaborate wooden box in his hands. A messenger brought the box in and asked for it to be given to Jane. She opens it. She's like, oh, it's from Edward because it's a dagger that we used to play with when we were kids. Insane choice of toy for kids. Fucking Stan is like, I guess this is like English slang, but Stan is like, bit manky, isn't it? And like, what the fuck does manky mean? Great question. Manky means worthless, rotten, or in bad taste, filthy, dirty, or bad. Ugh, okay.
It was a nice dagger.
It was a nice dagger. He insults the shit out of her knife. He's like, okay, fine, weird, and like leaves the room. After he leaves, she removes the butt cap from the end of the dagger's handle, and there is a little gap where Edward has hidden a note and tells her to meet him at the palace at noon in our secret place, our special place or whatever. And Jane is like, oh my God, Edward, amazing. There's no way he would have done this to me on purpose. Great. She goes to meet Edward before her entire entourage is set to depart for her honeymoon. When they meet, Edward asks Jane, hey, I have a friend who's having a problem. And it's like, Edward, you don't have any friends. He says, I'm having a friend who's having a problem. He thinks he's being poisoned with Tofana, which is the poison that they found off of that merchant at the market. Jane is instantly like eyes wide, like, oh my God, Tofana, you mean the Florentine Widowmaker? That's the worst, most lethal poison there is.
Not the Florentine Widowmaker.
Not the Florentine Widowmaker. And Edward's like, shit, what happens if you have prolonged exposure to Tofana? And Jane is like, oh, it like eats up your lungs and you just cough up chunks of lung and blood until you die. There's no antidote for it. And Edward's like, lit, awesome, nice. I'm saying lit, awesome, nice. That's how I would react. He fucking panics, obviously. And in his panic, has an argument with Jane because Jane is trying to deal with the fact that she's married to a fucking Ethian. I guess she like assumed that he knew since he was the one who approved the marriage. She kind of gets from their conversation that he doesn't know. Like he doesn't know that Guilford's an Ethian, but regardless is kind of like, yeah, you were going to get married to Guilford, whatever. That's your duty. That's what you have to do. And she's like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, I didn't want to get married. Like, annul the marriage. And he's like, no. What the fuck is wrong with you? What's your problem? Edward is trying to catch these fucking hands, okay? He's trying to catch the hands of the viewer. He's definitely trying to catch Jane's hands. Oh, he gets on my nerves. He says that she is now Guilford Dudley's property. And Jane is so wounded by this, so hurt, that she immediately leaves the palace. She goes back to the Dudley estate while Edward goes back to his own royal palace and informs his court that he has been made aware that one of them is poisoning him. Seymour and Dudley both seem like sycophantic, like teacher's pet type kids because they're both trying to curry favor with the king, who's 15 years old. They both promise, like speaking over each other, that they're going to find the poisoner at any cost. We'll do anything, monarchy above everything. And Edward dismisses them. Meanwhile, Seymour tells Mary that the king is onto them because obviously they are the ones coordinating the poisoning of the king. Mary wants to be queen. And he's like, shit, he's found out somehow. I don't know how. And Mary's like, great. You know what? I gave this to you for long enough. Now I have to deal with this. I have to make this better. I'm going to take charge of this situation. Lord Dudley, on the other hand, sends Stan to bring him the king's will, which is somewhere else in the palace, guarded somewhere else, because now he's worried that the throne is under threat. And he impresses upon Stan that if anyone else is on the throne other than Edward, who we've already seen as the viewer isn't super aggressive against Ethians, right? Isn't very bloodthirsty about Ethians, reminds him if Mary gets on the throne, it puts all Ethians, including your brother, who you have a weird seeming relationship with, in danger. And then Stan is like, all right, well, fine, I'll go help you, but doesn't seem to kind of like feel the severity of the whole situation. After Stan is sent away by Lord Dudley to find the will, we see him doing this kind of like hilarious walk run up to Lady Frances at her residence. And he like knocks on the door. Lady Frances comes in behind, the butler that opens the door for him. And she's already like pissed off to see him. She's like, what do you want? And Stan is like, because he fell in love with her, I guess. Pussy so good, he fall in love. And and Stan is like, I didn't know where else to go, right? Like, I didn't know who else to talk to. King Edward's will is missing. My dad sent me to get it. I looked for it everywhere. I don't know where it is. I don't know what to do. And Lady Frances is like, shit. And Stan is like, if we can't find the will, what does that mean? And Lady Frances goes, it means that we're all fucked.
Yep.
Lady Frances, you and your impeccable energy 100% of the time. So we see a scene at the palace where Mary, Bess, and Lord Dudley all show up in King Edward's room to announce that Dudley was the poisoner. Unbeknownst to him, he was the poisoner.
I would love to point out that in the book, he was the poisoner.
And Mary kind of like a passenger seat drove. Once she realized that Lord Dudley was poisoning Edward, she was kind of like, lit, that's fine with me.
And then they worked together from there.
Exactly. Whereas on the show, Mary and her Lord Seymour are directly the poisoners. They're the ones who are trying the hardest to take the throne away from Edward. Lord Dudley wanted to take the throne from Edward, but he was willing to do it with like more vanilla means, but not Princess Mary. She wanted to get it no matter what. So Dudley is like, what? What are you talking about? I'm not the fucking poisoner. He's trying to defend himself. But Lord Seymour has snuck a packet of Tofana into his pocket and pulls it out in front of King Edward. And is like, look, here's the poison. He's trying to poison you. Lord Dudley's like, who put that there? What? Lord Seymour says, obviously, Lord Dudley was trying to poison you because his son just married Jane. And he wants Jane to be queen so that his son can become the king. That feels like a one too many steps, right? Like that feels like a little convoluted, but fine. Edward is like, oh my God, you tried to poison me. He has Dudley arrested while Mary continues trying to poison Edward again, shaking the Tofana powder immediately in his face. He notices King Henry's eyeball ring that was given to Lord Seymour. He sees the eyeball hanging off of Mary's chain where she put it after she took it away from Lord Seymour. And he's like coming to the realization she's a poisoner as he's going unconscious. Yikes. I also want to say, so the thing that she's using to like shake the powder at him I'm forgetting the name of it, but I'm almost positive it's this like scent diffuser kind of like perfume ball that women of that era used to wear on chains around their waists, because as they walked, the motion swishing back and forth would release, like, depending on whatever you had in that little ball, like whatever type of scent, it would release like a nice scent around you because everything smelled so fucking bad.
Where most of the people at court had like a little something to put an essence in. Like men, I think, had something that they would wear maybe on their lapel or on their jacket that they would carry around, put flowers or dried whatever to help with the smell around everything and everyone.
It's so funny that they're like, let me carry some like dry ass scented flowers in a little ball around my waist. I'm not gonna bathe though. Anyway. It's so crazy. So she uses that, which she would usually carry around with her, has filled it with Tafana, shakes it with his face. Or, excuse me, shakes it in his face. Shakes it with his face. So Jane is like, all right, great, fuck. She goes back into the estate and is basically told like, oh yeah, everything's been packed up. You guys are taking it with you on your honeymoon. This already rings your bells because you're like, why would you take your wedding gifts on your honeymoon? That's fucking weird. And it's probably because Lord Dudley took it.
Took the wedding gifts. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Like, because he's in a ton of debt and doesn't have any money. Yeah, he probably took his own kids' wedding gifts.
Because you don't ever see these wedding gifts ever again.
You never see them again. These like gold fucking goblets and coins and shit, you never see them again. She wants to grab one of the wedding gifts, some of the gold coins or the jewels, etc., and maybe pawn it, sell it, give it to somebody in exchange for their help to help her escape. She is like basically hustled by all of the staff who have been instructed by Lord Dudley into a carriage. She's with Guilford's groom, who is one of the only other people that knows that he's an Athean because he cares for him as a horse. She's in the carriage, a horse-drawn carriage, pulled by other horses. And Guilford is actually attached to the carriage by a rope from behind, which is funny.
Why do they need the rope? Because he's going to get away? Is he going to...
I don't know.
He's going to steer off?
It's so fucking weird.
The rope's a little demoralizing. I don't like it.
It is. I would feel very insulted if I was Guilford. But yeah, the rope is attaching him to the main part of the carriage. Jane is still trying to plot how to get away. I'm going to remind you guys that it is the 1550s. Jane is like a 16 or 17-year-old girl, and they're in the middle of what was apparently like a very dangerous traveling time and area. At any point in time, you could be like set upon by fucking, I don't know, scoundrels or whatever, and they would take all of your shit and like murder you. So they're driving during the day, and Jane goes to the groom who is steering the carriage, and she's like, hey dude, what she says is, I need to stop for a waz, which means she has to go pee.
A waz?
Like, I was watching that for the first time and I paused it and I turned to Ryan and with my mouth like hanging open. I was like, a waz?
I've heard whiz.
I've also heard whiz. Is that a British thing? Waz? Right in. Okay. So she wants to stop for a waz. And the groom is like, no, it's really dangerous out here. I don't want to leave you alone. And she goes, I'm totally fine. Like, look at all these horses. I'm not alone. And he's like, all right, fine. Like, yeah, I'll go have a pee, whatever. So she goes to pee first, comes back. He leaves her alone briefly to also go pee. As Jane is like trying to plot her getaway, she is set upon by a random man with like a big stick threatening her, who's like, give me whatever's in your trunk. She opens up the trunks immediately, the trunks that are supposedly filled with their wedding gifts. The trunks are filled with books, and the books are all like obscure medical texts and like Athean medical books. And so Jane is like shooting eyes at Guilford because he would have been the one, obviously with this special interest, to pack all these books.
Yeah.
The man goes to attack her, and Jane just starts throwing books at his head to get him to go away, which ends up working out pretty well. I mean, these books seem really heavy, and like it would hurt. So the man runs off and turns into a goat. She was set upon by an Athean robber. The groom comes back. They're both kind of shaken up. But again, Jane is now very intrigued by Guilford. I think now she's realizing that she knows very little about him. Later that night, we see that Guilford is back to his human form now that he and Jane are fully away at their honeymoon, which is just at a different estate in the English countryside. He tells Jane that he would be open to divorcing her if she would help him find the cure for him turning into an Ethian every day. She tells him all she wants, her heart's desire, is freedom. Freedom from marriage, freedom from her family. His heart's desire is to stop being an Ethian. So if they can help each other out, he'll give her what she wants. They don't have to stay married, and then hopefully he'll be cured. Great. Guilford drops Jane off at her room. They seem to have come to some kind of like white flag truce. Like they can be friends now. He tells her as he drops her off at her chambers that they do not need to fulfill marital obligations, you know, since they don't like each other. And also because they're planning to get divorced, right? If she helps him and solves his problem, he will let her get a divorce. Sure, totally. They don't like each other at all. No, they're eye fucking all the time. All they want to do is bone. They're not doing that. It's like very annoying.
Can I just say, aside from Jane obviously wanting to bone this man, okay?
Yeah.
This is very short-sighted of Jane because she just assumes that getting a divorce means freedom. As if she's not going to need to marry in the society that they live in. She's not going to need to marry again for financial
protection.
Freedom. And it's like, ma'am, you have this husband who's not around during the day. You can do what you want.
Correct.
Continue to work on your book that you were working on that now you have to rewrite because your mom burned it. And you only have to see him at night for maybe have dinner. Hi, bye.
He's not making you have sex with him. He seems nice.
Ma'am.
I know.
Jane.
I know.
Jane. Come on, baby girl. I think it's
just showing off the fact that Jane is fucking 17 and she thinks that she can be free at this point in time. But I don't know. Maybe the show is trying to like, warp our expectations.
True. Right away, I kind of think of Lady Francis, right? And like her scheming. Because the way I'm thinking about it, right? The way I just rationalized that, it's like, okay, just kind of get with the program and this is your freedom. Use this as your freedom.
Right.
Play the game, essentially. And I think that's kind of what we see Lady Francis doing, right? And we see her as cunning and scheming and a bit conniving to her daughters because, hey, this is the world that we live in and this is how we have to play this game.
Yeah.
Where I think for Jane, she's like, fuck the game. Fuck the game. It shouldn't exist this way. Even though maybe she can live like this in comfort and make the best of it, it shouldn't be this way, period.
I shouldn't have to deal with this at all. Yeah, girl. I mean, are we being realistic? No. But I respect the shit out of it, Jane. Fucking admire it. It is my least favorite trope when people that like each other refuse to like each other. Especially like in this situation, they're already married. It is giving Bridgerton season 1. Like,
yeah. Minus the lie. I mean, there's a bit of
a bit of lying.
There was a bit of deception in the beginning here with the whole Ethian thing.
The whole Ethian thing. Jesus. This episode ends with Edward in this like creepy dark room in a part of the palace called the Turret, which is kind of like its own room isolated high up in a tower. Mary and Seymour plotted to lock him away in that room after he fell unconscious when he was freshly poisoned with mortafana. And he wakes up in the middle of the night. It's dark as shit. He hears voices from outside. It's Mary and Lord Seymour basically coming back to finish the job. We know that as the viewer, he just figures it out as the king. He's like, oh shit, like they're back to kill me. Mary is so strange. If I was planning to murder someone, but I wanted to put them at ease beforehand, why would I be pounding on the door, terrifying them? Why would I do that? That's so fucking stupid. She is pounding on this door like she'll win a prize for doing it. Edward! Dong, 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 dong.
Open the door. I promise.
Open the door!
It's for a good reason.
I promise it's fine. I'm not going to kill you. Like, that was just such a wild choice to me. Like, but Mary's supposed to be unhinged. Like, that's what you get from every moment that she spends on screen. So she's pounding away on this door. Edward is so fucking afraid. He has nothing really with which to defend himself. So he's like staring around this room. Is there anything I can use? No, not really. Fuck. And then looks out the window. But he's up on this high tower. And he goes and he kind of stands in the windowsill and he's looking outside, but the tower's up really high. And then it's like really close to the edge of the water. And what do? finally, Mary and Lord Seymour break into his room. Edward is gone. They look out the window and onto the water. All they see is a waterlogged cloak. Dun, dun, dun. Skirt. That's that, baby. And that's episode 2 of My Lady Jane.
So, sisters, that's the first 2 episodes of My Lady Jane, the intro to this kooky, endearing world of historical fiction and fantasy. What a hoot and a holler. Stick with us for this 4-part rewatch and discussion of this show.
Unintentional 4-part rewatch. Like it always is.
Always. Because we
Always.
can't shut the fuck up. And we love talking about this shit. So, yes, stick with us as we rewatch and continue to discuss My Lady Jane.
If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, please leave a review anywhere you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram at Sisflix Podcast, on YouTube at Sisflix Podcast, on Patreon at Sisflix Podcast. You're sensing a theme here. And we're on Letterboxd, where we've left a handful of quippy little reviews on some of the movies that we've covered. So find us on any of those platforms. Chat with us on Instagram. We love your DMs. We love going back and forth with y'all. Rate, review, share. Tell all your friends. Tell your mom. Maybe, I don't know, if your mom
Maybe
is cool
not your
cursing.
mom.
Maybe
Yeah,
not your
there's
mom.
a lot of
yeah.
cursing. I don't know.
Yeah, we curse a lot.
Depends on how cool your mom is.
My own mom doesn't love how much I curse, but
No.
thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.